It's Tuesday evening here in Wiltshire, England, United Kingdom. Just in a week from now, or just over, because of course we're several hours ahead of you, it will be the end of ballot casting in the United States, and I wanted to have a chat about the whole process to my pals in America. I do have a connection with the United States. I grew up there in the 1950s. My father became an American citizen, and I'm incredibly concerned about what is going on and what will go on. And I have to say, I've been seeing the reports of the Americans standing in voting lines for hours on end, and I am genuinely full of admiration and respect for what all of you are doing. And you have to ask, why the lines? The sophisticated means of voter suppression in the United States are undoubted. All sorts of barriers are put in the way. And as someone who has voted in the United Kingdom for decades now and have never encountered any sort of suppression problem, intimidation, standing in line, I've been really thinking about what's gone wrong with America and voting. And I've done some research and I've read some history. I've had a look at these ridiculous ballot papers that you have to fill in. They're usually 2 pages long. In a general election, you have to not only vote for president and vice president, but senators, representatives, members of school boards locally, astonishingly some referendum type questions about amendments to state laws. And some of the ballots seem to go on for more than 2 pages. And because that produces a very complex document, you need machines to count them, to read them, to tabulate them. And of course the problem with using machines, which I love machines, I love technology, it goes wrong. All you need is a power cut and you can't vote, or the vote is delayed, or the count is delayed, or the tabulating is delayed. And because you have to wait for hours in lines, in itself that would be a deterrent to voting. So respect once again to all the Americans, tens of millions now, who have stood for hours in line to vote. It doesn't happen here. Or if it does, it's a matter of waiting for half an hour, no more, and it's pretty unusual at that. There are all sorts of ways that American voters are suppressed and deterred, but I just thought I'd like to focus on the nature of the ballot paper. And without even complicating my remarks with postal or mail-in voting or early voting or anything else, here in the United Kingdom we have on-demand postal voting, which is very efficiently done and very easy to do. And then even when you get a result, and this year, let's face it, it's going to be a real battle to get the result. It will take a long time. And with patience and restraint, you will get a result. And even if everything were to go perfectly smoothly and in a normal sort of American general election, it's weeks and weeks and weeks until you have a new president and a new government. Here, it happens overnight. And you might say, don't you need a transition period? Well, no, because we have a highly professional civil service that is dedicated to effecting government policy in a non-partisan way. And the civil service here is full of experts, all the experts you need, scientists, economists, historians, you name it, they're all in place. And right down to the levels of the engineers and the operatives who make government work. There is a complete continuity. Over here we vote on Thursdays, which is archaic, and a lot of people think it should be changed to a weekend. I personally think it should simply be made a public holiday so people are not restricted in their access to the polls by having to spend 8 or 9 hours at work. But nevertheless, it works so well. I'm not saying nothing ever goes wrong. There are recounts, there are disputes. The overall result of the election might be there's no workable majority, so that while there might be a largest party, it's not a question of they're going to be able to govern without significant opposition and votes against them. And of course then we sort that sort of thing out by a lot of discussion and perhaps forming coalitions, or even the government might successfully argue that they have a plurality which is workable and they can form a government. That is the test. And once that is decided, the leader of the party with the most members of parliament takes a short drive to Buckingham Palace, has a nice cup of tea with the Queen, and he becomes Prime Minister, and she becomes Prime Minister. The system here is completely different. We have an executive, that is the civil service. We have a judiciary, and by the way, judges are appointed on merit, decided by an independent council of lawyers. We have the legislature, which is the Houses of Parliament, the Commons, the most important one, and the House of Lords. A lot of people debate about this because none of them have been elected, oh my God. But in fact it works out quite well because they have very limited powers, but they do have powers of revision, and the House of Lords is populated by a lot of experts, and because they don't have to seek re-election, they can be quite considered and cross-party in the way that they suggest revisions to proposed legislation. So how do we get a government? Well, it's really very elegantly simple, and most of the time it works really very well. Here's what happens. The United Kingdom, that is England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, because a general election covers the United Kingdom, the rules are the same. Wherever you live, the rules of running an election are the same. Even down to the polls will open at 7 in the morning and close at 10 in the evening. There's no local variation to deal with. The country, the United Kingdom, is divided up into 650 constituencies, and in population terms they're all more or less the same size, around 70,000 constituents. And within those constituencies, independent local officials run elections and they make sure that everything goes well as it possibly can, whether it's a sparsely populated rural constituency in the Highlands of Scotland or just a little part of London. And the first removal to any barrier to voting is what happens on polling day. And it's sorted out so that for every 1,000 voters, roughly 1,000 voters, there is an allocated polling station, which is open from 7 in the morning to 10 in the evening. And therefore, one polling station only has to deal with roughly 1,000 voters on the day, even if you exclude or include the people voting by mail. So what happens when you vote? Well, you go down the high street and you do a bit of shopping, and you think, right, I'll go along and vote. So you go to your designated voting station, you walk into it, you go up to a desk, and an official there has a printed list of all the constituents that are designated to vote at that polling station. And then all sorts of old-fashioned things happen. So you say, I'm so-and-so, and here's my address, or you can show them your voting card, but you don't need to. So they look down the list, and they get a ruler, and they draw a line through your name and address. So that says you voted, so you can't do it again. They give you a ballot paper, which is a simple list of the candidates who want to be your MP, your Member of Parliament, in your constituency of roughly 70,000 people. So instead of this ridiculousness of what you guys have, this is what we are handed. This is just a sample ballot. Remember your 3 pages, your 2 pages with about 1 million things and people to vote for? That has to be machine read, or it's the voter delivered by pressing a lever or punching a card or any of that craziness where all sorts of stuff can go wrong. We walk to our polling booth with our ballot paper. There's a pencil tied to the desk with a piece of string. You think, pencil, my God! But there's apparently even a reason for that. Because if people use ink and the ink doesn't dry, when you fold your ballot paper, you might end up voting for more than one person, and that will spoil your ballot paper. So the ballot paper reads, election of the Member of Parliament for the so-and-so constituency. Vote for only one candidate by putting a cross in the box next to your choice. Now, I did wonder, what if you put a tick by mistake? Or what if you drew a smiley face in the box? Well, the rule here is, as long as the intention of the voter is clear, the ballot is valid. So you're presented with a list of the candidates, the people who desperately want to become your Member of Parliament, and you put a cross against only one name. So here's what it looks like. So you do that, you fold it in half, you walk to the locked ballot boxes, you post it, and you return to the supermarket because you've forgotten the milk. That's it. Why is this an elegant system? The votes are counted by hand once the polls have closed. They're counted by hand by human beings who are supervised through the whole process, and there's all sorts of checks that go on to make sure that the number of ballots actually physically cast matches the number of names crossed off in the constituency. Nothing can interfere with this. It's paper and people. No hacking, no machine breakdown, no attacks on servers, no failure of servers, and it's quick. It's so well organized and so almost completely foolproof that contests in constituencies are unusual. Often after a couple of hours, you know who your MP is going to be. So by late in the evening, perhaps the early hours, depends if it's a close or not so close election, you already know the winning party. And the leader of that party becomes Prime Minister, and they choose their cabinet ministers, and all the cabinet ministers are members of Parliament. So there's no pulling people in from industry and everything else and cronyism and everything. At least the people who run our government departments, the Foreign Secretary, the Home Secretary, the Ministry of Defence, the Education Ministries, whatever it is, Minister of Health, they are all accountable members of Parliament. So almost all of the time you wake up on Friday morning and you know who is your new or continuing Prime Minister. Finish. We have a different constitution, and for you to simplify or make more elegant your system of voting is a bit like trying to get the egg out of the cake. I realise that. But surely in the 17th and 18th centuries, when they didn't have computers, when they didn't have punch cards, when they didn't have machine readers, they must have made it work. And surely it wouldn't be beyond the wit of man and woman to make significant adjustments to your system of elections, especially general elections, so that you reduce the reliance on machines, that you make it much quicker for the individual voter to get into the polling station and cast their ballot and then go about their business. So that's just part of the current American nightmare. My thoughts really are with all of you in the United States. I think you're all doing an incredible job. I think you're very brave. I sincerely hope that we see the end of this monster who has somehow become the leader of your country. I hope it goes well. I hope you either have voted or when you vote it will be peaceable and as trouble-free as it can be. And I hope that you stay safe, that America stays safe, and that all of you people, you great American voting public, can relieve, first of all, yourselves from this horror, but also all of the rest of us all over the world. Because America has done some wonderful things. I still remember the landing on the moon in 1969 and how the whole world felt, at least for a time, united. So you're good at uniting people, and I think you'll be pretty good at doing it again. Stay safe.